Hi, I'm Glenn.
I'm Cheryl.
And this is Couple Thoughts. A little while ago, we asked the big question, which was,
why aren't women in the majority for board gaming?
And you guys had a lot of really cool things to say. One of the things that I appreciate about this in general was we had some really great answers. And yeah. I think in general, when you think about asking questions that have, the possibility of being controversial on the internet, you expect a lot of trolls or a lot of people who have mean or angry or generally negative
responses,
not contributing anything to the actual thing. So I really appreciated how cool some of the responses were. And specifically, really want to shout out the Women in Gaming section of Board Game Geek. This is the second time that we've posted something in that group, and they just have they knock it out of the park. There are a lot of really cool and thoughtful and meaningful responses that we've gotten both times, and so huge thanks to them for their couple thoughts on this one.
So we thought we'd follow up. And we thought we'd kind of give you guys an idea of what people have said and what the responses have been. Basically, I think we've gotten two kind of overall ideas. That there's issues with theme and that there has something to do with gender roles.
Yeah. So
we thought we'd share some things that we thought were really interesting and also kind of summarize in general what we got in response.
Yeah. So the one tar... who also has a really cool review website, which I highly recommend you check out. Tiffany said, yes, theming is generally written to target men, in so much as how they were raised. Girls weren't raised to build rockets, settle in space, or be superheroes. The themes in gaming aren't typically things girls are taught to do or to like. To find a lot of girl gamers were tomboys growing up, playing with what we weren't supposed to. There's a big drive right now, especially in the hard sciences field, where we need more women constantly. It all starts on the toy aisle. So related to that, we had a comment from Ren Women. How would you say that username? Renwomen. Yeah, there aren't many vowels. So she said on Board Game Geek, she said, while pondering this question, I realized while I have a fairly good idea of the history and evolution of RPG, tabletop, and video games, I don't have the same knowledge for board games. I've been playing RPG games and video games from the 80s, but started playing board games later. From only my perceptions, it appears that board gaming in general is more, quote, female-friendly than the other two pursuits. I'm not sure exactly what time period more complicated board games became more prevalent or in what regions. I'm not sure how the board gaming culture was in the, quote, early days for women. My preference in themes of games of all types are solidly in the camp of games most people consider, quote, for guys. I like fantasy and science fiction themes and enjoy games with combat and conflict. I have a strong preference for Ameritrash games over Euro games. The Euro games I gravitate towards have themes that are more in common with Ameritrash. I found that most games are designed specifically, quote, for women or girls, are very unappealing to me. Part of that may come from the fact that I have resented gender marketing from a very young age. I do think it's really interesting how theme can really be the hook or the thing which can really push somebody away from a game. Mm-hmm. I was working with a bunch of college students at one point, and I remember saying, like, hey, I got this new game called King of Tokyo. You guys should come and play with me. And there were a large number of people who, like, especially people who are more prone to kind of geeky things, were really comfortable kind of delving into something like that, or any number of the games that I brought along. But a lot of them did feel really uncomfortable because they didn't want to be a geek, or they thought in general they just don't necessarily like very nerdy things.
Yeah, I think it's tricky for me to feel like I can speak for womankind because I did in general grow up with in a family where being pursuing whatever interest was totally encouraged and appreciated. So like my sister and I and my brother are all super into science fiction, like have been for a long time.
Sure.
And fantasy things, especially in like more in literature.
Yeah.
Because obviously we didn't do a ton of gaming stuff, but like movies and literature and stuff like that. Like we didn't have this strong like draw towards being gender specific. We all did stuff similarly, but also on the same hand, I wouldn't have considered myself a tomboy at all. Like I liked going to tea and reading Jane Austen and all those kinds of things. So, so I never felt weird being into kind of more guy-ish things like science fiction.
Sure.
But I can see that if you didn't kind of grow up around that kind of thing, that it would be either uncomfortable or disinteresting.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So
I think this conversation is kind of shifting from theme to gender roles.
Yeah.
And we had quite a few responses about gender roles.
Yeah, quite a few.
So this one we found really interesting that talks a little bit about that. And it's from Woo Do 03.
Yeah. Yeah, or The Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski, right. Which also I'm sure appealed to you. This comment was probably really
far out,
intriguing. Man. And so what he says is, I like the provocation of the thread. The statement in the video was like, girls like socializing, gaming is socializing, so what? I know this is simplified too much. My wife gave me a very clear answer. A, she loves socializing. B, the majority of the games are about competition, which hinders socializing. C, many games have violence in theme, which does not go over very well with socializing. B and C just turns her off, so she prefers socializing by sharing a cup of tea. Easier for everyone.
Yeah.
Which I love this comment.
Yeah, and I actually think it relates to kind of how you ended the video.
Right.
You kind of said that there is an aspect of gaming where it feels like it's a doing, or it's something that you kind of are working on, or whatever, competing, as Voodoo says. So I think it's related to kind of how you ended it by saying that guys prefer kind of that side by side socializing, whereas
girls would rather just have a cup of coffee together.
Yeah.
Glass of wine or whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's pretty true. And I don't know that that's I don't know if it's a gender stereotype or if it was a nature versus nurture thing, but I think in society, I feel like that's accurate. Well,
and one thing that I noticed a lot, we didn't grab a quote from this, but a lot of the things that I noticed was there were a lot of people, both men and women, who commented on this, saying that a lot of their game groups, especially game groups which occurred either at their house or maybe they did some like meetup.com type stuff, or stuff where it was especially your close friends and things like that, they, by and large, while they may not all be dominated or, kind of the majority being female, they were, by and large, I mean, there were, most of them were saying that they had, quite a few of them had large numbers of women which were included in them.
Right.
So I thought that was an interesting idea too, that maybe it isn't something, maybe because of the way we structure a lot of the local gaming stores, or maybe because of, I don't know exactly what that is. But the idea of, I think going back to Ren Women's comment,
Amy, I think was her name.
Amy, yeah, going back to Amy's comment, I think there is something about board games in particular. I think, like you said in the last video, which is like playing a board game is not something that feels like you're leaving your comfort zone per se. Like the activity of playing a board game doesn't feel like you're leaving your comfort zone.
Right.
Whereas potentially going and playing maybe at a local store or something like that may feel slightly more.
Right.
And obviously that's a huge. I'm making huge generalizations, but also at the same time, we're I'm trying to stick with some of the spirit of some of the comments that were said.
Yeah. So another one. So Oxford Row on Board Game Geek writes about how women have less time, basically.
Okay.
So one thing she says is she saw this in her own life, women kind of not having enough time. I played games with other girls all the time growing up and through college. Gradually, one by one, they all dropped out as the marriage and kids came along. Don't have time was the usual refrain, yet in many cases their mates kept playing, leaving the women to be the babysitter. So this idea that women take on this larger role of caretaker and that diminishes their time to play games and develop that hobby. What do you think?
What do you think?
I mean, I think that I go back and forth.
Okay.
And we've talked a little bit about it, and I've gone kind of back and forth on it. Well, I think I can see that. I think there's a general case where women do take on some of the burden of caretaking when they have kids and whatever, and, making dinner or whatever. I don't think that that's the case in all families. I think, it's not like men don't do any part of that.
Certainly. And I don't know that she ends up saying, I don't know.
No, I don't think she's saying that at all.
Right.
But I'm just saying, so it is true that, and I find my friends are all starting to have kids and stuff. They have less time in general just to socialize and whatever. But I also think that I have friends who, feel really strongly about something. And so they pick the hobby that they most care about and kind of focus in on that.
That's interesting.
And once kids get a little bit older, there's a little bit more freedom, I think, for moms to restart figuring out things that they like to do. So I don't know if I think as a very broad general thing, then I can see it. But I think on a case by case, it's going to vary.
You would say it probably depends, maybe at least in part, based on kind of them choosing what are most important in terms of the hobbies they can continue to pursue or not.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that sounds accurate to me.
Good.
Yeah.
I like to be accurate.
I know you do. One last one that I thought was interesting, relating again back to theme and relating to specifically being in a kind of a couple relationship, which is what we do. From Devin Lewis on YouTube, he said, having my wife play board games is an added layer to our friendship. That being said, she doesn't consider herself a gamer. She seems to think that it might be theme that doesn't attract more females, for example, playing Ticket to Ride versus Twilight Imperium. I wanted to close maybe just on the idea of, are there themes which you feel like maybe just are not appealing on the whole, either to you or maybe do you see there being themes in general that are less appealing to maybe some of your female counterparts?
I think, for me, something like Risk, no appeal.
That's interesting.
So, I would say probably, kind of board games are less appealing to me unless they have another aspect to their theme.
Okay.
For example, War of the Ring has the Lord of the Rings theme with it.
Yeah.
So that draws me in. If it was just armies fighting against each other, I'm not as excited about that probably.
Okay.
And I think it's really dependent on, I don't know that there's a super generalization from the games that I've played.
Okay.
Because, and that could be just because I know a lot of girls who like things like science fiction. I think if the game is fun, then for me, I can either become more interested in a game that has a theme I'm less interested in if the mechanics are good, or if the mechanics aren't good, the theme will really make it more enjoyable for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Again, really, really, really was stoked with the responses that we got. I was totally impressed that it managed to stay really respectful and polite, and that nobody flame warred anybody else. So I really appreciated that aspect of it. I hope we can continue having conversations like this, because I think these are not only important conversations to have, but they're also just really, they're also really interesting and fun if they can be done in the right tone and in the right manner.
Yeah.
This will not be what we do every time. I think next time we're going to talk about games that are more than games. They are entire hobbies unto themselves. So we'll be talking about that next time. That should post sometime later this week. Please stay tuned for that, and we will see you guys next time.
Have a great day.